This is WGN Morning News at 7.
Welcome back. We're less than a week away from the 10th anniversary of 9/11. It is the day that obviously changed our country forever. Shortly after the two planes struck the Twin Towers, a courageous group of Chicago firefighters jumped in their cars and headed to New York to provide assistance. 343 New York City firefighters lost their lives at Ground Zero. And joining us today are a few of the firefighters from Chicago who made that trip to New York. Tom Ryan is president of the Local 2 Chicago Firefighters Union. Paul Enheldler is a retired Chicago Fire Department lieutenant and instructor. And Tim O'Brien is a Chicago firefighter and director of PR for Local 2 Chicago Firefighters Union. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us, Robin.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Boy, we all remember the pictures on that day, but as firefighters, knowing what was happening and that firefighters were actually in those buildings, it had to be devastating. Tom, you drove the next day down there, correct?
Yes, actually, Tim and I took off the next morning. We really didn't know each other all that well, to be quite honest with you. We just, but standing there watching those towers come down, New York fights fires the same way we do, and we knew that building had to be loaded with them, and that feeling I'll never forget.
Tim, maybe you guys can describe what you saw down there. I think I read after you guys were talking to our producers that the TV doesn't do it justice. There were just shoes everywhere. I mean, shoes, paper, things you wouldn't think about, right?
The only thing I can really say that most closely describe it was looking at pictures of war-torn Europe. There was no color. Everything was gray from the concrete dust and the ash. Everything had the exact same, very bland, monotone color to it. It was unfathomable when you first approached it. You couldn't believe the devastation. It was really something we weren't prepared for.
And Paul, you went down with 23 other firefighters late at the end of September, correct?
Yes.
And you guys you just walked right up and they let anyone come and help out, right?
Several of our members that were with us knew some of the New York members, so we were able to get into the pile. And we were able to work about 10, 12 hours.
And you also say that you spent about 8 days just going to funerals and wakes.
Yes, we did. We went to approximately 2 wakes a day and 1 funeral every day for 8 straight days.
It's just, I don't think people have an idea of what it was like down there. Have you guys felt any side effects health-wise? They say a lot of people that work down there had problems.
The death toll of that day is still happening today. I mean, there are so many people that are sick. Not only firefighters and first responders, all the iron workers and the volunteers and the citizens that gave up their time to go down there. Those jobs that recovery effort could not have been done without the efforts of the citizens and the other people other than firefighters and police officers. And they are feeling the effects today. There's a lot of people that are very sick.
Paul, you said that you remember one story vividly about a firefighter that was in a stairwell and rescued someone, and tell me that story.
Yes, going to one of the funerals on one of the days in Long Island, we met a firefighter from Lattice Company 6 who had been in the stairwell. His company had stopped to rescue a woman, to help carry her down. She was, I believe, in a wheelchair. And when the buildings came down all around them, and they survived. And when I had met this member, it was his first time out of the house since 9/11, because it was one of his members that they were actually burying that day. The casket actually without anything inside of it, because they had never found any of them. But he kept asking about why him and why his team, and the only thing I could think of at that time was that the man upstairs had bigger plans for him. But he was devastated. I could never ever comprehend how he was feeling or what he's still going through to this day, and the rest of those individuals.
Tim, or maybe a couple other you want to comment about this too. What is it about firefighters that feel this brotherhood with people they've never met in New York? Obviously, we all felt so awful on that day, but what is it about firefighters that they all went?
It's fraternal. It really is. It's an incredible fraternity. It's a fantastic brotherhood. I personally couldn't be luckier to have this job. It's the job I chose when I was 5 years old, and I got blessed and I was lucky enough to be hired by the Chicago Fire Department. And I didn't know I was going to have it. It's just something that grows on you, if you're in it. And you know what? You're safe no matter where you're at in the country. You can walk into a firehouse and say, I need help. And you can too, Robin, no matter where you're at. You can walk in and say, I need help. A lot of people don't realize that. You don't always need a police station. The police do a wonderful job, but firefighters will help anybody, anywhere, anytime. And it's just a wonderful brotherhood to belong to.
Tom, you said that you were worried because your son was in school, and you think kids aren't really, 10 years later, aren't learning enough about this. Is that possible? We can't be forgetting about this,
Absolutely.
Right?
I picked my son up about 3 years ago on September 11th from school, and I asked him, what did you do in school today? And I said, did you talk about 9/11? He says, Dad, it wasn't even mentioned. And I said, and that's why Tim and Paul and I, we're very reluctant to do this, because talking about this is still difficult 10 years later. But we owe it to the survivors. We owe it to the people that ran into those buildings to never forget what they did, their sacrifice, and the loved ones that they left behind. There are thousands of kids out there without their fathers, and it's just both firefighters, police officers, and civilians. People forget about the civilians. They were murdered. I mean, this was a horrible thing that happened, and we could never, ever forget what happened there.
Well, thanks to all of you for your service and your dedication, and we appreciate you doing something for the American people in addition to us in Chicago. And why don't you guys tell us about your memorial? Is it a stair climb you guys are doing coming up?
Yes. This Saturday, there's a memorial stair climb at the Aon Center.
Okay.
And we're looking for 2 firefighters to represent each fallen firefighter. There's 343 firefighters that passed away. We're looking for 684 firefighters to do the stair climb. There's still a couple of spaces open. It's filling up rapidly, and we're going to ascend to the top of the tower.
Okay, and for more information, you can go to our website. We'll have information about that. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a programming note, WGN is going to air a special report this Friday night called Ground Zero Chicago Remembers. Allison Payne will report from New York on the memorial that will open next weekend. The special also includes stories of Chicagoans who survived the attack and those who put their lives on hold to help. That's Friday night at 9:30 here on WGN.